Hello and welcome to an introduction to JSON Web Tokens, also known as JWT. And today we're not only going to explain the concept of JWTs, why we need them, but we're also going to show a beginner entry into how to implement JWT. So let's go ahead and let's begin. I have on the screen down here the JWT docs pulled up, so let's make that full screen. And we're going to go through this real quick together. And JWT, they have fantastic documentation. They even have a little sandbox here for you to begin to interact with, and we might interact with that a little bit. But let's first start off with a concept that goes over talking about JWTs. Here is the analogy. Imagine that you are a citizen that needs to fly internationally. To fly international, you need a passport to prove that you are a citizen of one particular country. Me, I live in the United States, so I will use an example surrounding the United States. If I wanted to fly to Europe or Asia or anywhere else, I would need to present my passport at the airport, indicating that I am a valid citizen and that I am who I say I am. And on that passport has my name, my address, and each passport even has a serial number that is tied directly to a specific passport. How terrible would it be if every time I wanted to fly internationally, I would have to go through the passport verification process, but not actually receive a passport? That wouldn't make much sense. It would be very time consuming, very inconvenient, but that's what a JWT solves. In our applications, we build authentication forms that imagine if every time you wanted to perform a function on a website, you had to log in or sign up again. That would be pretty terrible. What a JWT is, it's essentially a passport that is saved into your browser that says, I am who I say I am, okay? And here in the documentation, we actually have over here on the left-hand side, a string that consists of 3 separate sections. Altogether, this string indicates that you are who you say you are, and it allows you to perform various functions, and it helps persist your user within websites, making it so you only have to log in once every X amount of days. And so just looking at this, we have the ability to play around and see how extra information is going to affect this string that we generate. And so in order to create this string, very similar to a passport, we need some personal information, typically from your user profile on a website. And so here in this purple section down here, we have the ability to alter some of this information to see what would happen. And so I can come in here and I can say that my name is Brady Bot, and notice how that changes this purple string. And you can use any type of information you want. You could even add an email if you wanted to, and you could say that my email is, bot@bot.bot, or whatever it might be. And, whatever other information is directly tied to a user, you are more than welcome to use for the verification and encoding process. So for instance, if I owned a sandwich shop, it would be pretty funny if I had a sandwich preference field and you could say Turkey and Swiss, right? That is something that you very well could do. And notice how every time I add a field, it is going to increase the complexity of this string that is my token, okay? And again, this token, even though it looks like a bunch of numbers, letters, this houses all of the information that I have over here, okay? And so this is a perfect passport for my information, and so let's get talking about how we can implement one right now. In the description of this video, there is a link to a GitHub repo. I want you to fork that repo and then clone it down to your machine. And so you can go ahead and pause the video until you have that ready. Once you have cloned down the repo to your machine and started it up in the browser, it should look something like this. It should be a very simple form with a username, email, and a password with a button that says Get Token. Now I also have my console here pulled up in the bottom half of my browser. We'll be using that here in a moment. but find yourself inside of the controllers folder inside of the auth.js controller. This is going to be where we will code, and this is where we will begin to work on our JWT functionality. Now, the first thing that we must do is we must create a function that is able to create these tokens. And so I have here a function outside of our module.exports object. This function is called generate token. Now, this function is going to receive some information, all right? And what it's going to do is all this function does is it returns a signed JWT. And so that function is simply jwt.sign. So this is the method that we use to actually create a token. Now, .sign takes in 3 arguments. The first is the information that you want to actually use for the encoding process. The second is an environment secret, which I will show you how to create. And the third is some options that go into actually verifying and qualifying the token. And we'll be using one such option today. So let's go ahead and let's get started. Inside of here, I'm going to hit enter and I'm going to create an object. Okay, and remember, this is going to be our information we want to use for encoding. I apologize for my poor typing. I promise. I type for a living. So this is our information that we want to use for encoding. Next is going to be some type of secret. And then we have our options. Okay, so I'm gonna just create that structure here now. And at this point, before we get diving too far into this, let's talk about the second point right here, which is actually the secret. This secret is something that is typically stored in your server that is not available elsewhere. And so we're actually going to come into our .env file here, which is currently empty. We're going to create an environment variable called secret. Now, I want you to type anything that you want to type. The secret is simply a string that is used in the encoding process, similar to a string that you used to use with your little codes out of cereal boxes. So my secret is going to be, I love coding in JavaScript, not Python. Sorry if you code in Python, I like coding in JavaScript. So that is my secret. Now that secret stays here, it is hidden, I don't use it anywhere else. This is where it stays. Now head back over to your auth.js controller. And we are going to, up on line 2, we are going to require .env.config invoked. Okay. Now this line is going to configure this file to use environment variables. Next up, we simply say const secret, all caps, is equal to process.env.secret. And so we are going to get that secret from our server, or from our environment variables, my bad, and we're going to use it in our server. So right here on line 10 where I put our double quotes, let's go ahead and remove those double quotes and put our secret. And that is how you implement a secret into JWT. Now in an actual deployed environment, you would put that environment secret into your config file on your hosting system, whatever it may be. So the information we want to use for encoding. Now we will be passing up a username, email, and password. I will say it's probably best to only use information that is not a password. So username and email is probably going to be our best bet for this example. So let's go ahead and let's say that username is equal to info.username. And then let's say email is set to info.email, like so. And so we're going to be using these two key value pairs in our encoding process. Next up, we have to define an option. Now, the option that we're going to talk about today is actually called expires in. Now, this is going to be a string that is going to be a very short descriptor of time. And so you could do 10 days, 10 weeks, 90 days, 1 year. For us, we're going to do 5 minutes. That is long enough for this particular lecture and this particular video. If you don't want this token to ever expire, simply leave this blank or get rid of this property and your token will not expire. So we've successfully created a generate token function. It's now time to come down here to our module.exports, our create token function, which is handling our endpoint request. And we need to say let token equal generate token, and we will pass in our request body. From there, all we do is we give a response status of 200, and we are going to send the token back to the front end. That is all that is required. So this request body is going to be a username, an email, and a password. So let's go ahead and let's give it a shot. One thing before we actually send this off is in your console, go ahead and open up the application tab. You can do that by clicking the double arrows, scroll down and select application. We're going to watch this as we submit this form. So as we submit this form, we are going to create a username. My name will be Bot Brady, email will be bot@bot.com, and my password is going to be super secret. And now let's go ahead and let's click the Get Token button. And sure enough, if we look inside of our application tab, we now have inside of our local storage, make this a little bit bigger, inside of our local storage, a token. Now, if you want to look at the front end code and see how this was done, you are more than welcome to. But this token is something that we can now get, and as I refresh, notice how this section that wasn't there before is still there. Now, I do have a button here that is going to test the token because we need to see if a token is indeed valid or if a token has since expired. And that's what this endpoint is going to be, our validate token. Typically, this is not a function that you will just have an endpoint for. Typically, this will be some type of middleware to ensure that the user is who they say they are before they post to the newsfeed, add an item to cart, checkout, various items that would require ensuring that the user is indeed an authenticated user. And so here inside of our validate token, we are going to actually grab the token by getting a specific header that we're sending in the request in the front end, which is the authorization header. So we're going to do request.get authorization. And theoretically, that token right there, this red token, is now the token that we have saved into our browser. So we should be able to see if it is indeed a valid token. And we do this with let valid equal JWT dot verify, and we're going to pass in the token and we are going to use the secret. We need both in order to ensure that this is a valid token. Next, we're going to say if it is indeed a valid token, we're going to have a res.status 200, and we're going to send the message success. And then we will have an else that is a res.status 400. We will send invalid. I'm going to get rid of this console log that was there previously. But this should be all that we need to ensure that we have a valid token. So let's go ahead and let's click the test token. And sure enough, I get the phrase that my token is indeed valid. That's fantastic. What we're going to do next is we're going to make it invalid. So I'm going to go ahead and in my application over here, I'm going to click this button right here in order to clear my local storage. Okay, again, that is right there where it is flashing red. I'm going to click that. I no longer have a token. I'm going to refresh, and we're going to create something new inside of our expires in so that it then is invalid in, let's do 15 seconds. 15 seconds should give us enough time to get a valid token, test it a couple times, and then test it once more to make sure it becomes invalid. So once we have changed the expires in to 15 seconds, let's go ahead and let's fill this out one more time. And let's go ahead and let's get the token. And we can test the token. And sure enough, I get the alert that says my token is valid. And so theoretically, if we've written everything else well enough, then we should be able to get an alert that says that our token is invalid. So I'm going to click it one more time. And sure enough, we get the alert that says that the token is invalid. And so we've written everything appropriately in order to test and make sure that our JWTs are working, that they're being saved appropriately, sent up correctly. But this is just an introduction to JWT. I recommend that you go check out their docs. And again, this is the link for their documentations. It is jwt.io. You're able to go there, check it out, see what else you can do with these. But this is simply an introduction. I hope this was helpful. And go ahead and check out some of my other stuff. Leave a like if this was helpful. Subscribe to stay tuned for when I come out with more stuff. And I'll talk to you all later. Peace.